Okay, everybody, we're going to start the meeting now. There's a couple of people that are just still coming in, as always, the way now that we're used to Zooms. People who come in last minute on that. Let me just get my slides up here. Excellent. Stephen Salian, do you mind giving me a thumbs up if you can see that? Hey, wonderful. It's always a good start. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and good afternoon. Today, we're going to talk to you about how you can reframe your purpose and aligning the strategy with your people. And the reality is this came through conversations between Salian, Stephen, and myself, and ultimately we could spend hours on this subject. But we're going to try and condense it into a period, a short time, so you can walk away with some key information that you need to think about. But this isn't just about us talking to you. We want you to take advantage of this session, and we want it to be interactive. We don't just want to be some talking heads. So please go down to the chat box at the bottom, and in the Q&A function, you can ask some questions. And if you ask those questions, what we'll do is we'll interrupt the speaker at that time, and we'll actually raise those queries as they come through. And the goal is we want you to walk away with as much as you possibly can from this session. Now, this session is going to be an interesting one in my view, because I'm going to use the kind of most used word probably in the last 18 months other than COVID, and that's unprecedented. Unprecedented is now basically common parlance in all of our language, because reality is that is what we've dealt with. It's been unprecedented. But actually what you also have to be very conscious of in that period of being unprecedented is that whether you're a business owner or whether you're HR, you have to deal and act with far more purpose and be far more deliberate than you've ever been before. And this is the problem statement that we're going to call out now. And it's the fact that we at the moment are dealing with greater polarization than we've ever dealt with before. You're going to have some people that want to get vaccinated in your workforce. You're going to have some people that don't want to. How are you going to deal with that as an organization? You will have some people you furloughed and some that you haven't. Now you're going to bring them back together. They will have had incredibly different experiences over the last year. Some people want to work from home. Some people actually panic with anxiety of the concept of going back into the office or traveling and being in public transport. So that idea of the decisions you make, whether it's as a business owner or as an HR department, if you don't act with purpose and being really deliberate, you're going to potentially risk losing your people in that journey. And when you think about your why as a business, it's probably gone through huge change. And who you were 2 years ago as an organization versus who you are going forward might be fundamentally different. Now, the one thing people have done is revisit their values. And if they don't understand who you are as an organization and your why, are they going to stay? But not just that, everybody in their own right, when they've been locked at home, has been reprioritizing what's important to them. What are their values? Is it work-to-life balance? Is it career? Is it progression? Is it money? Is it, I don't need as much because I don't need the lifestyle I thought I was living before. And now the final one is the Great Resignation. Now, this was coined from a phrase from Texas A&M on the research they've done. And when you take this period for all those reasons, and then you have people that have been stuck at home desperate for change, when that job market opens back up, are people going to leave? Especially when all of us had a financial concern last year when the world kind of stopped. So this idea of Great Resignation means that if you don't act with purpose and you're really delivering what you do, well, if you just look at that center circle, 41% of the global workforce would consider leaving their current employer. And that was done by Microsoft. Now, I'm not being funny. If you are running a business right now and 4 in 10 of your employees are thinking about leaving and you're not really purposeful and deliberate in everything you do, what does that create as a risk to your business? And those are some of the things we're going to cover off. So by introduction, we'll introduce ourselves now. I'm Geoff Day. I run a financial advisory firm, but actually we do a huge amount of work around financial well-being. And over the last year, we have spoken to hundreds and hundreds of employees across all different industries and across all different socioeconomic backgrounds. And those numbers of the 41% that are looking to leave, from conversations, I'm surprised it's that low. Because when you talk to people, people are desperate for change. And so I'm going to talk about where people are on their emotional journey and what you need to think about. Sally-Ann, do you want to talk about what you're going to cover off?
Thank you, Geoff. Hello, good afternoon. Really delighted to be here. I'm Sally Ann Hall-Jones. I'm the CEO of Reality HR. We're an independent outsourced HR consultancy business covering a good part of the south of England. I'm here because we work with approximately 180 businesses of varying sizes, predominantly in the SME world. And whilst I don't profess to be an expert at all, what I can bring to the discussion is some really fantastic anecdotal evidence from the businesses that we work with and the journey that we've been on with them over the last 15 months, those long 15 months. And so I'm going to talk about some of the tactical things you should be thinking about as business owners as we move into the next stage of this journey that we're on. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Stephen Carson, it's great to be here and thanks for joining us. I'm a business performance consultant and advisor, predominantly working with business owners and senior leadership team within SMEs, right through their business life cycle. So from early stage business planning up to scaling up the businesses and finally maximizing the value ahead of exit. I think sort of with all the change that we've seen happen over the last year and a half, focus and emphasis become more and more important on the purpose of the business. Why does the business actually exist? And what I'm going to talk about today is how do we pull that together from a strategic perspective? A revisit, an opportunity just to stand back from the day-to-day, just to stand back from what you're doing and reconsider or consider exactly where your business is at the moment, relative to what it is that you wish to achieve. So why does your business actually exist? And that's fundamental in terms of framing your purpose. So shall I get started, Geoff, or we'll go straight into it?
Yeah, please do. So, can you see your company just on there, just to check?
Yes, I can. Yep, perfect. Thank you. So as Geoff has started talking about Microsoft study, McKinsey has done similar studies, and as early as April 2021, they did a study and came back and said employees expect their jobs to bring a really significant sense of purpose. Employees are looking for a lot more out of their lives, a lot more out of their jobs than what existed pre-COVID. And if you don't help your employees find that purpose in themselves and in what they deliver back to the business, you watch them leave. Thanks, Geoff. So the key question that comes from that is saying, what is your company's core reason for being? So kind of during the pandemic, we pretty much, all companies have experienced eye-watering change. The speed of change has been incredible. And that's illustrated in what can be achieved when necessity demands. So for some businesses, changes involved some significant shifts in technology, in working practices, in the way services are delivered. In some instances, new products coming to the market, or even in terms of the existing products that we sell. And that's all evolved. And even in some cases, it has raised the question of what business are we actually in? And pivot has become, not my favorite word, but certainly one of the most used words in business. But so when you look at that, what do so many businesses ended up with? They've ended up through this pandemic or through simple evolution in their business or simply advancement in terms of technology, ended up with this real patchwork of products and services and a real mismatch of customers. We can say that that could be perfectly normal as we kind of chase the next sale, but only some of those products and services are really going to add value to your company. So the question that we should really be asking ourselves is, what should a company's purpose be when the purpose for so many up until now could have been and may still be around survival? So whether it's during the lockdown or whether you're reflecting on your business as you're currently looking forward as we slowly edge our way back to what we consider to be normal, is it not time as the business owner or that senior leadership team to kind of really reflect on what defines your company purpose, its core reason for being, and probably what impact it has on the world? Thanks, Geoff. So with employees, with employees and customers now really paying close attention to, in the lockdown, to brand activism and a sense of social purpose, you've really got to question purpose of the company and how that reflects on the well-being of the employees, the people in the community that they work in, the heart of the corporate of your corporate strategy. People are seeking a lot more in terms of digital skills and connectivity. The home environment has changed significantly, and it's become critically important that kind of people feel really comfortable at home. They feel comfortable working in the environment. Local communities have become a lot stronger. Local communities have grown. People have really enjoyed a lot more of the outdoors. So you've got this patchwork of products and services and customers, and you've got this real change in the socio-economic environment. It does really raise the question then of saying, well, kind of what business are we really in? So when you're asking what business are you really in, you're really asking the question, you're really articulating the question of what is your company purpose? And clearly, can you articulate your company purpose clearly? And if you can your staff? And if they can't, are you and your staff then merely coming to a job every day? So McKinsey did a survey across 1,000 companies, and they found that 82% of businesses affirmed the importance of a purpose. However, only 42% reported that their company's stated purpose actually had very much effect. And they believed that that wasn't really surprising. Because why? Pretty much where majority of business owners that I engage with is their company purpose statements are so generic, they actually have very little to challenge the business as usual. And others just simply don't emphasize any of the concerns of the employees. So contributing to society and creating meaningful work environment, the two top priorities that came out of the study. And yet, when you talk about contributing to society, only 21% of purpose statements focused on contributing in society. And shockingly, only 11% of those actually touched on creating a meaningful work environment. So why is a company purpose so important? It really is about, it's the kind of glue that holds the organization together. It's the glue that holds everything together. It connects team members, it provides structure, it gives everybody some shared goals. Purpose keeps us on the straight and narrow. It keeps us in the direction in which we need to go. It helps attract and retain productive talent. It helps growing the business much easier. It helps define difficult decisions, because if you know exactly where you're going and what the purpose of the business is, it certainly makes future a lot easier to navigate. And it drives customer satisfaction and overall business performance. Let's have a look at kind of what purpose statements look like and give you a sense. We all know Tesla, we all know Facebook. There's no doubting what market Tesla's in or what products they offer. They're in the electric car market. They have a compelling product to the mass market. They're all about sustainability, and they want to do it as soon as possible. I don't think anybody can doubt that what Tesla does and what you get a sense and feel for who they are is 100% aligned to the purpose of that business, as is Facebook, to give people the power to build community and bring the world closer together. Really powerful. Thanks, Geoff. Maybe a slightly less, a lesser known business is Just, or as it's known, Eat Just Inc. What do? They use technology to help develop plant-based foods. So their purpose is to build a food system where everybody eats well. And eating well means eating food that nourishes our bodies and eating food that strengthens the planet. Eating food that tastes exceptionally good and it's just for all. So what's their core product? One of their core products is a plant-based substitute for eggs. So they replaced eggs with a mung bean. They've created an egg substitute. Very, very focused, very purpose-driven on delivering a better plant-based food that helps the planet and helps individuals in terms of a healthy lifestyle. So they only founded 10 years ago. Interesting, 2019, this business was valued at over $1 billion. That's not too bad for a purpose-driven business. Or how about Best Buys? the US version of Currys in the UK. So interesting, Best Buyers was looking, basically stock market, the market said Best Buyers was going to die back in 2012. And the reason behind that was consumer electronics was declining. It wasn't really growing, and it had become very, very commoditized. So maybe they would have died if they hadn't reflected on their strategy and looked at it from the idea that it's not a store that simply sold electronics. So they looked at their strategy from a much broader lens, and they've come up with what they've termed their noble purpose, which really changed the game for the business. And their noble purpose is to enrich lives through technology. So that noble purpose has kind of really changed the way they do business. It's unleashed some significant innovation and growth. It's helped them identify key human needs that they want to address through what the service products and services they offer, like communication and security. They shifted their business from focusing on really transactional selling products to one that developed solutions, long-lasting customer relationships. They made their purpose kind of the cornerstone of their corporate strategy, and they embraced and mobilized all their stakeholders and aligned all their management practices to deliver that noble purpose. Their efforts resulted in a fundamental rethink about the way they do business, and they opened up a really rich vein of opportunity as a result. So Hubert Joy, who was the CEO and chairman of the business, turned that business from a $1.7 billion loss to a business that completely went against the market and increased their stock price from $11 to $110 in under 8 years. They also became the leader in sustainability and innovation. How? By pursuing a really noble cause, putting their people at the center of their business and creating an environment where every employee could blossom. And they treated profits as an outcome rather than as a goal. Now, that's not too bad for the US version of Currys that we know in the UK. Interesting to see.
There's a question that's come through around that, where a lot of the companies are big. I'll paraphrase it a bit. A lot of companies are very big that we're talking about. When you talk more to, say, the small to medium-sized enterprise, how important is it for them to have a purpose and a very clear vision like that? Especially when, some of those companies, I'm going to paraphrase massively, some of the companies that we might have on the call here aren't trying to change the world in the way that Tesla is and various other firms. So how important is it to have a really clear purpose there?
Geoff, I think it's absolutely critical. I think, and the reason why we kind of why I throw some of the bigger companies into the equation is because we're very familiar with them, but also the ones that I've quoted have got a brilliant example of how they managed to take the purpose, and that filtrates right through the business. Now you can imagine whether you're taking 10,000, 100,000 employees and getting them aligned to a single strategy like a Tesla that turns around, that you can't question what it is that they do. And the power that has in terms of the way that translates out into the consumer. You take that to a smaller or an SME business and say, hey, is it possible? Is it futuristic? Is it too big for us as a small business to have a purpose? Absolutely not. And it comes fundamental in terms of aligning employees and also aligning the purpose of those employees with the purpose of the business. Helps with your alignment in terms of strategy of employment. It helps alignment in terms of direction of business. And from a consumer perspective, with that whole growth of the socioeconomic view and the behavior of companies becoming the fore during COVID, absolutely critical time for SMEs to be aligned and aligned on what their purpose is, and also to go back and revisit that patchwork, step away from the patchwork and say, what is core to our business? What do we do and why are we here? So absolutely fundamental for the smaller business.
Thank you.
All right. Very quickly in terms of the next example. I mean, we're all familiar with this dog, little puppy, pink collar, appears on TV every night, Vitality Health. Just an interesting part about Vitality Health. I mean, they're a global financial services business. They basically sell insurance, healthcare insurance. But what they've done is they've completely turned the model on its head, and they now created the world's leading behavioral change program that encourages and rewards a better life through living a healthier life. And they're transforming the world of insurance through what they call shared value. Their shared value is they giving back rewards for their members who lead a healthier life. So they know society is increasing, demanding that companies have this kind of strong social presence I've just mentioned and focus on a healthier society. And that's truly at the forefront of their purpose, to make people healthier and enhance and protect their lives. The benefit is the shared value program is good for their members, and it's good for them, and it's good for society. Great positioning. So if you have to go in and look at your own purpose, some of the key questions you've got to ask yourself, irrespective of the size of the business, is why do I do what I do? Why does my organization exist? Why do we matter? What does your organization do better than anyone else? What do I want to be known for? What makes me unique? And what is my company niche? Now, if you actually stand back and start answering those questions, the depth, it's a lot deeper than simply jotting down something on paper. It's how does that then, in the same process, that core focus, then emulate out of your business. Once you understand that and you've got your core focus, you can then put in place the people and the processes and the systems to drive it forward, most importantly, consistently. So finally, just having a team that's kind of driven by a sense of purpose, comes to work, they're present, they're focused, and they're energized, will really define the difference between a thriving and dynamic business versus one that's kind of filled with firefighting, non-value activities and recurring problems. You know, without that sense of purpose, you will find those firefighting, you will find those recurring problems. And maybe that's where the SME can associate. I mean, are you living in a thriving and dynamic environment, or are you living in a problem-solving, non-value adding, recurring problem environment? And stand back from that and ask whether or not there's a sense of purpose in your business. And do your staff know? If you've got a high staff turnover and high absenteeism, customer complaints and poor productivity, it has to have a direct relationship, a correlation with your engagement of your team. And your engagement of your team is driven through the purpose. And the purpose is the glue that holds that organization together. So going back to what Geoff was saying, be deliberate. Develop your company's true north, your noble purpose, because when it comes to living your company values, employee engagement and the decisions you make, you need to ensure that you get a positive response from your staff to this one question. And that is, does the purpose of your company make you feel like your job is important? And if you as the business owner and the SME has to ask the question, how do you survive and thrive in a new world? Then you've got to answer the question is, how well does your company strategy reflect its purpose? Because when your why becomes clear, the how is transformed and multiple doors of what are opened up to you. So from a strategic perspective, do you have a sense of purpose? And do your staff, does your staff know and live what that purpose stands for? So thanks, Geoff. Maybe you can take us a little through in terms of how that then can relate to staff and their personal position around their why.
Absolutely. No, that's brilliant. And Sally Ann, I lost my Q&A function a little bit in there. I know that I could see a question there, but I couldn't pull it down. And I also want to say, Stephen, I'm really impressed. At no point did you use next slide, please, which is the other common phrase we'd be very accustomed to, which is the hazard when you've got one person driving. So I'm very impressed by that. But Sally Ann, I could also see a question there. Do you mind asking what that question was, if you can pull it up?
Bear with me.
I'll see if I can get it back now that I'm not sharing the screen, but
yeah, so it's a question from Brendan. Hi Brendan. So the question is, we've published mission statements, company charters and company values in the past. Is the company purpose different to these? That is a great question, because there's often a real interdependency between all those different phrases. So good question. Stephen, what do you think?
You're on mute. That's the other key phrase we've heard this year.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had it covered there for a second. Thanks, Brendan. Yeah, a really key question, because what you want to do is this isn't a, you want to make it a practical exercise, and a practical exercise is understanding the difference between all of those, because it's got to have buy-in from the staff. So if you look at it from a vision perspective, a vision is really what does the future successful organization look like? It's about where your company's heading. So you're kind of setting that benchmark down the line. So what would success look like down the line is where you would look at in terms of your company vision. Your purpose is around your reason for existence. So why are we here? And then your company values is about basically, how does your staff behave? Look at it from perspective, how does your staff behave if you're not there? So if I clearly understand where I'm going in my vision, understand why it is that I'm doing what I'm doing, which is the purpose, and I can explain and I can define the behaviors that everybody would have within the organization to work on the purpose. Once you deliver your purpose, you'll reach your vision. So vision, where we're going, purpose is your why, your values is how you behave.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm now going to jump in we're going to move from the strategic side to talk about the people side and the year that we've all been through. And we've all had various guises around this, but this picture resonated quite well for me, because the amount of times I've heard Groundhog Day, I just need change, I'm bored of my four walls. I think we've all experienced that in the last year. And when you can take yourself back to the first time that we suddenly ended up in lockdown, you ended up not knowing if anybody had a job. We didn't know what was going to happen economically. Suddenly everything had stopped. Using Brendan, I know from an estate agency perspective, you couldn't even get people into houses to view them. So, industry suddenly just almost stopped with the fear of disappearing overnight. Now that created, any way you cut it, it created fear, it created worries about our health, but it also created huge concerns about finances. And I know that from the conversations we have with lots of people. And then we went through the don't panic phase. And, the fact that we panic bought toilet paper when we were worried if we were going to get our next paycheck, when actually COVID had nothing to do with your backside. It just goes to show that there was panic and there were some irrational decisions that were out there, but everybody was in that state to some extent. And then you think of your workforce and the polarization in your workforce. You had some people that were the bedrock. They kept your business going whilst working from home, whilst homeschooling, whilst raising their children, working longer hours than ever have happened before because of that bit they couldn't shut off. And sometimes we're doing the job of 2 or 3 people. And the pressure people felt whilst feeling like every day was Groundhog Day has really shifted people's focus and changed their own purpose and value system. And then you had other people that you furloughed. And the polarization here is huge. Some people were furloughed. They suddenly were on a reduction of pay, and they genuinely went to bed every night worried where they're going to pay their mortgage, when they're going to keep food on the table, because they actually needed their pay. And other people had the best year they've ever had because they were furloughed. They got paid for a year off. They spent the time with their children that actually they were at home with. Now they complained they were bored because homeschooling wasn't exactly what they wanted to do, but they had a pretty good time, some of them. And actually, I've seen friends fall out from the conversation that they have. Now, for those that were working, they've never worked harder than ever before because of that bit of they were stuck at home oftentimes and they were doing the work of many. Now, I want to give you an idea here of what's going to happen as the world returns to normal and people come into the office again, in theory. And you have that water cooler moment, or that bit where you get people together for summer drinks or whatever it's going to be. And somebody goes, let's put 3 people at the water cooler. And the first one goes, do you know what? I've had the best year last year because I've had all my time at home. I've had more time with my family. Balance has been brilliant. That's actually been really good. And the other 2 people, one of them is furloughed, that actually has worried every night about keeping the roof over their head. And the other one sat there thinking, I've literally tried to keep this business going and I've never worked harder in my life. What is going to happen to your workforce at that point? Now, if you're not really full of purpose and being very deliberate and being really important about this is why you want to work for us, your last 10 years of work potentially on the company culture and what you're trying to do will disappear in one conversation. Now, that's an extreme example, but I've seen that happen through friends. I've talked to clients where actually marriages have ended because of furlough, because one person's been at home and not pulling the weight whilst the other's been working, and they realized there was a massive imbalance in relationships. So it's not going to be surprising if at a work perspective, when people are desperate for change, What's one thing they can change? Well, that's work. And if we end up with a buoyant job market, the idea of the great resignation isn't far away. And when you think about why, now there's some reasons why, but if you haven't read Simon Sinek, start with why. I would encourage it. Whether we realize it or not, we have all over this last year been questioning our own why. Why am I doing what I'm doing? What's really important to me? And when you think what's changed for people, people have thought, well, do I need to earn as much as I did before? Because actually, I don't need as much money. I've proven that, because oftentimes I'm not spending the way that I used to. I just need change. I don't care what it is. I just desperately need to get out of this house and do something different. We've also had the fear of mortality. And a lot of people have realized life is not a rehearsal. The amount of conversations I have with clients now, which is saying, actually, if I can retire earlier, I want to, because I want to have a bit of freedom back. Location. If you have a sort of local business, actually nobody now needs to, in theory, live where they work, depending on what the work practices are. People are looking at moving further afield with the hope that they're going to be able to work from home. Work-to-life balance has never been more important, because actually we've seen that pressure. And when you culminate all of that, where's your employee loyalty? And Sally Ann and I, we had a conversation. If you don't know this person, this is Chris Martin of Coldplay. So pretty famous. Hasn't really had to worry about money or many other things, but we actually ended up listening to an interview and in our own respective cars, and called each other after. And this is a guy who basically has the world at his feet, and his whole bit of his new album was, I just went back to making music I wanted to make, rather than what we've done in the past that was maybe commercialized, because I suddenly realized, actually, outside of a stadium of 50,000 people screaming my name, who am I? I'm not being funny. That's the guy that has kind of the world at his feet. And he's suddenly gone, actually, I don't even know who I am. And now that I've been stuck at home without 50,000 people screaming my name, what do I stand for? Well, we've all had that sort of juxtaposition of what's important to us. And what we've been doing with clients, and it's really interesting, is I class clients into 4 categories, and you'll know which one you sit in here, is when we do an analysis for people, we say, you're either in the position of you have not enough, so you need to save more. You've got too much, so maybe you've got an inheritance tax risk, or you've got just enough, and you're going to be all right. The 4th category is, I have absolutely no idea. I'd say 95% of the people I speak with have absolutely no idea where they are on their financial future. So if you overlay some of these stats where, Legal and General deadline to breadline report, the average household is 24 days from the breadline. Roughly half of people feel losing their income is their biggest worry. And this actually, the data was correlated before COVID. And the average household does not have enough money to really last. And then you looked at a survey that came out during COVID, and it was the fact that, the anxiety around money was massive. And so when you think about your own company, you wanted to get the most from your people, where they're worried about their finances, they have no idea if they've got enough for their future. And actually you get a job market that might open up and start to become a little bit more buoyant, and their loyalty with you from the last conversation may have changed. What do you think is going to happen? So as an employer, you have a real sort of opportunity to do things a bit differently than the peer and add value. And when you talk about poor financial well-being, if you want to be just completely commercial about this, it actually, and this was pre-COVID, it was costing UK employers £1.56 billion a year due to absenteeism and presenteeism. Because people worried about money and they just weren't there. They were taking sick days, they were taking time off. And actually that problem has only exacerbated. Now, everybody in my view is focusing on mental well-being at the moment. And I don't disagree with that, because mental well-being, we have a problem and we have a challenge on everything that's happened in the last year. But oftentimes mental well-being is actually what's the tip of the iceberg. Sitting below that iceberg is actually things like the wider health and well-being and the financial well-being. And I think employers really need to look at how are they putting in programs and policies and procedures to help around the health and well-being, the financial well-being, because actually what that will do is, it by its very nature, it will reduce some of that mental anxiety that people have. And if we can really do more in that space, you will deal with some of the problems that's causing people to be off work for stress, say anxiety, and long-term sick issues. So there's lots of things that can add value there. And when you talk about employees and what they think about what they get for work, most people just look at their income. Yeah, depending on what you have, depending on what your education and communication program is. So what do I get? Income, salary, bonus. Now, either if you want to retain people, you have to make sure that's incredibly competitive, or they will go somewhere else for that pay change as part of the Great Resignation program. But actually, what else do you offer there? You know, if you start looking at things like, well, we do other things than just the income and the salary, because anybody can try and match that or beat that. But what is, you know, talking about your purpose, what is the policies and procedures you have in place? What does that mean around the benefits, the pension? What's there to help them out if something happens to them, that their family will be okay? Voluntary benefits that are there, so shopping discounts and everything else. And what's within your wider well-being or financial well-being program to really help them feel like, actually, my employer really does care about me. And then below the line, you've got some of these blur is around the culture and what's there from the future. So is there support for them? Do they see a career progression? You know, just today I met a client who's leaving because they saw no career progression in their organization. And they're actually going somewhere for a slight reduction in pay, but with the idea they're going to be on a training track to move into partner into a legal firm. So actually, it's not always about pay. It's about what are the opportunities you've got there? What's the development? We're seeing a massive increase out there in conversations around things like EMI shares. And EMI shares are where basically you can give a stake to employees within the company. And the idea that the owner wants to essentially retire or move away at some point, and therefore you bring your employees as having part ownership. Now that can fit into part of the wider benefit strategy or some of the future in the organization. But unless you have kind of the wider well-being and strategies there, are they really going to see a place and a purpose within that company? I don't know, Sally, and just before and Stephen, before I move on to the next one, are there any questions that have come through there while I flick over to Sally Ann next?
Yeah, there's a really good question, Geoff, from Paul. Paul, just an aside, I'd be really interested in a conversation with you outside of this webinar, because I think there's probably some synergy with our client base and what you do. However, the question is, if we agree that well-being relates to career, finance, social, cultural and health attributes, does the panel sense we're now at the point where business leaders need ongoing support to shape their version of a well-being driven organisation? And Paul says we're a group of doctors and brand marketeers focused on helping organisations navigate new health and well-being expectations. So Geoff, have you got any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, absolutely. I do work with a few different firms that do employee benefits. I do work with companies like Reality HR around well-being. And there is a need to get support to come in and look at that. It's really difficult for employers to kind of be able to manage that all themselves. The stuff that's coming through the programs and the consultants and the support that's there is growing at a massive pace at the moment. And I do think trying to do this just on your own actually can be very problematic. Having a really good strategy that actually fits back to Stephen's bit around the purpose, so everybody understands what you truly stand for, what you're doing, and then having that ingrained in actually, we want you to be a part of this. We want your career progression. We want your development in order to help with this. And this is where we're looking to go. Actually can help people, take people along on that journey. It's difficult depending on the size of the organization, how you do it. You've seen a lot of the big FTSE 100 companies, for example, they've been going down this path for a number of years, but they're trying to accelerate that. You're seeing a lot more coming into the medium-sized enterprise space that is there to try and help and support them as well. So I don't know if that fully answered the question, or Sally Ann, if you've got any opposing views.
Well, I'm going to talk in a minute, so I thought I'd just see if Stephen's got anything to add, and then I'll just weave something into my slide. Stephen, did you want to add anything?
I just think well-being is being redefined over the last 18 months to 2 years, and I think what we perceived well-being to be was very centric in terms of just the organization and the development of the organization. And that's just become a lot wider now. So, you know, as Paul has said, you know, it covers career, finance, social, cultural, health attributes. It's got to do with the company as well as with the individual. It's moved so far. So I think seeking outside help and helping leaders to get that ongoing support to, number one, is understand what well-being means to the business, as well as understand what well-being means to the individual employees, is going to take a lot of time and focus and effort to get that right, because it's evolved so much that it's a new world. We are dealing with new realities around well-being. And unless we can understand what the employees' well-being, what well-being means to them, and that well-being aligns to the purpose of the organization, you'll get an engaged organization. Without that, you're not going to get an engaged organization. So seeking external help for leaders to extract that, I think that's become an essential part of business management moving forward.
Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you.
So on that note, that leads very nicely in. Thank you. So, I mean, I think we can all agree it's been a very, very long 15 months. And I see ourselves as being a bit of a crossroads here, and now's the time to really start thinking about how you're going to be asking your people to work in the future. And that statistic that Geoff shared with us at the beginning of 41%, 4 in 10 employees would move, really does focus minds in terms of what you now need to be doing as you start to put plans in place for the return to work in the future, whatever that looks like. So we all hear the terms hybrid working, blended working, some home working, but it's all those things and more that need to be given careful consideration as business leaders. So I've got 8 areas really for you to consider. Oh, you've done it already. Thank you, Geoff. I was about to say next slide, please, but you've done it already for me. Brilliant. So I think after a very long period of home working and social distancing, I think there's an understandable level of anxiety about a return to the workplace, obviously with the caveat that some people have never actually been away from the workplace, depending on their role and how they work and how they deliver. So I think we've all got responsibilities to keep people safe, and think very carefully about what it is we provide as employers in order to do that. So some real basic things as a starting point are workplace risk assessment. So, you know, look at your workplace in a way you've perhaps not viewed it previously, even down to things like what's the cleaning regime, what's the sanitizing, is there a one-way system in place, have people got enough space, and so on and so forth. All things that if you're not thinking about them, your teams definitely will be as they consider that return to the workplace. So give that some careful thought. And then also think about working patterns. You know, we've got a large number of clients who are really downsizing their office space for various reasons, but that means that potentially you can never have everyone together in the workplace again. So you need to think about working patterns and what that would look like. Think about how you feel about hot desking and what that means in terms of cleaning down, usage of communal areas as well. And also think about those individuals who perhaps have some more challenging personal circumstances. So, for example, those that have care and responsibilities or personal health issues, which may suggest it's better for them to continue working from home. What I would also say is that the way to get to the answers around these challenging questions is to talk to people, which sounds blindingly obvious, but actually talking to people and asking them, what would their ideal be? What does the return to the workplace look like? Do they need hybrid working? And so on and so forth. What's going to make them feel safe and comfortable, and more importantly, engaged and on board with you as an organisation, should be the starting point, the foundation for any decision making. I know we've been encouraging our clients to, all the way through the pandemic, to do regular pulse questionnaires with their employees, just to see where are they at really, but also have that eye to the future and use that as the basis for decision making. Next slide, please. Thank you. So vaccinations. So probably the most asked question we receive at the moment is whether or not employers can insist that their people have a COVID-19 vaccine. You may well have picked up in the press last week or the week before, Pimlico plumbers who were advertising for plumbers, and the ad was no jab, no job. So he's setting his stall out very clearly that if you haven't had a vaccine, there's no job. Now, there is an argument to be said, actually, the plumbers, that Pimlico plumbers, are going to work in people's homes. Have they got an obligation, therefore, to be keeping people safe that they interact with? It's a debate that will run and run, and I'm sure we'll be seeing lots and lots of case law around this as we go through the next year. But it's an interesting one. The short and tall of it is, it's debatable. You can't, it's not mandatory, and you can't force anyone to have the vaccine. vaccine. However, if you then referred to the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974, there is a basis for this by stating that employers must take reasonable steps to reduce any workplace risks. And I think there'll be some businesses that are reliant on that legislation should it be tested. But really seek advice. If you've got people who are not vaccinating and you have reason to think that they should be, and you have that obligation to keep all of your workforce safe, then give us a call and talk to us. We can share our experiences with you.
Can I just ask on a slight sort of legal side, would that be something that as we go forward would start to be into employment contracts? Because now we're already starting to see that they're talking about doing booster jabs this year. You think it will ever go that far?
It's really interesting. I think we'll need to see some case law go through first and see the courts make some decisions, and then that may then lead to it being something that's contractual. But I think we're probably a long way off that at the moment. I think we haven't even put our first little toe in the water of it as yet. So I think it's going to be fascinating to see how it does pan out over the next, I would suggest 12 months before we see some case law coming through. Good question. Thank you. Same goes for testing. Many employers are offering workplace testing, but you can't force people to test. You can ask, you can request, you can encourage. And then if you are testing and people are providing data, you obviously have to be mindful of GDPR regulations in terms of how you're storing that data. And again, you know, the most important thing here is communication with your people. Understand the reasons, the rationale behind not wanting vaccine, not testing, and remind them that you have an obligation to keep everyone safe. And that may mean if people ultimately are refusing, that they have to continue working from home, work remotely in order to keep everyone safe. So there's no easy answer, in short. The third step is about rebuilding your teams. So it's been bruising and brutal for teams over the last 15 months. And the longer it's gone on, the harder it's become. And I think really businesses are going to have to think very carefully about how they bring people back together. And certainly over summer months, we're hearing lots of suggestions of, you know, team events in gardens and so on and so forth to try and keep people safe. But I think ultimately we need to be thinking about reboarding, which is one of those new phrases that's come about over the last 12 months. But we've always thought about onboarding for new people starting an organisation. This is about reboarding. So it's not just about people who perhaps have joined an organisation and never met their colleagues, but it's about people who have perhaps got long-standing careers with organisations but need to be reboarded, need to understand, again, this is the way we do things around here, this is our culture, these are our values, and so on and so forth. This is our purpose, going back to Stephen's points. And I think there's a real importance around almost starting from scratch in terms of that process, and that will, I think, pay dividends. And communication is going to be very, very key. So, and again, probably very obvious, but talk to people regularly, and also think about team meetings. So should all team meetings be held virtually, for example, so that nobody is at a perceived advantage or disadvantage by being present in the room? And there's all sorts of tools and techniques that can be employed to help teams to rebuild. Insights is a fantastic tool for those of you who've come across that. There are many others, but really about understanding the skills within a team, the personality profiles, what people bring to a team, and then how to make the best of that. Next slide, please. Wellbeing and mental health. I'm not going to labour this one, we have touched on it, but really, I think there's been a real mindset change with business leaders about understanding the importance of supporting people with their wellbeing and mental health. And I think also understanding how people have reacted and responded to what we've all had to go through. And again, you know, if people don't have good mental health as well as physical health, and also that sense of well-being, then it can impact on their ability to be active and engaged members of organisations. And there are all sorts of things to consider. Lots of organisations have EAP. We've done some work with businesses around having wellness action plans, regular one-to-ones. Training for line managers is really key. So it's all very well us all saying, actually, we need to be mindful of people's wellbeing and mental health, but line managers don't necessarily know what to do. That they'll be willing, but they may not have the skills or experience. They're supporting them there. mental health first aiders are very, very important in organisations as well. Okay, number 5, hybrid and flexible working. So there was a recent survey by the CIPD, which is the professional body for HR, and the findings were that working from home on a regular basis is expected to rise to 37% of the workforce, which when we come out of this is probably going to be double the pre-crisis level of 18%. Massive implications in terms of what that means both for organisations but also wider business communities. So we really are seeing this trend towards hybrid and blended working, which is really, I suppose, another way of describing a balance between actually being present in a workplace versus working in a different environment. There are huge benefits to be had, but it does need careful thought and careful management, and can impact all sorts of things in terms of perceived productivity, perceived performance, perceived delivery. So there's a real education piece. It's not just as simple as saying, yes, it's fine, you go work from home for 3 days a week. I don't think there's either a single solution that fits every employer. It has to be very, very carefully considered on a case-by-case basis, and may result in a real need for some cultural shift, particularly in the mindset of some leaders, I would say. We've got some business leaders that we work with who really, really can't get their head around the fact that it's all right for people to work from home, and it's actually beneficial in lots of ways. They really, truly believe that unless you're actually present in the office, 9 to 5:30, delivery is not going to happen. There's also, I think, and we're seeing this already, a real increase in requests for flexible working, and I'm sure you'll know that any employee can submit a request for flexible working. The responsibility of the organisation is to consider the request, but then there's no obligation to grant them. But I think, you know, if people can evidence through 15 months of successfully working from home that they can still deliver their roles, it's going to be quite challenging for organisations to be rejecting those requests. And obviously, you know, those requests need to be considered not just in isolation, but in the full context of all requests that might be received. Number 6, holidays and contracts. So there's probably a huge backlog of holiday because really we can't go anywhere, so no one has been going anywhere, but holidays are really important. Going back to well-being, you know, we all need time away from the PC, the work, even though the work potentially is in the same 4 walls. So there's a real challenge for businesses to be able to deal with the backlog of holiday, particularly if businesses perhaps have been quieter through the pandemic, but are now seeing a real upsurge in their business. Recruitment is a real classic one. Recruitment is so buoyant at the moment. So it's about how do you manage that holiday, and how do you encourage people to take it, because obviously there is that legal obligation to provide holiday and for people to take it. And then also there's a challenge in terms of contractual changes that need to be considered. So if people have contracts that specify working hours or locations, and if working practices are significantly changing, i.e. moving to a blended working model, then there may be a need to update them. And again, the CIPD advises that where employees make a formal request for hybrid working through flexible working, that is in essence a formal change to terms and conditions of employment, which would need to be reflected. But again, what I would say is just seek some advice. So don't just go and stick something in someone's employment contract and hope for the best. Seek some advice just to make sure that things are properly reflected. We've seen some horrors in terms of employment contract content. Also think about policies. It could be that policies that you had pre-pandemic, which were completely fit for purpose, are now no longer appropriate, and there needs to be a reflection of people's working circumstance within those policies that you have. So give that some thought as well.
2 things. I'm conscious of time, but also actually there's 2 Q&As that have come through. Stephen, can you check those where Sally Ann covers the next one, because my Q&A function has disappeared. So I can't see what people are asking.
I'm gonna literally whip through the last 2 because I've only got 8 points. So number 7 is managing blended working teams. A lot of this I have touched on, but the only thing I'm going to just hone in on here is the right to disconnect from work. This has been heavily covered in the media in the last couple of weeks. So this is about people having the right to not check emails, make sure that it's clear what their out of hours working is, systems perhaps hold emails sent out of hours, and so on and so forth. So there's a good article in The Guardian around it, and we've recently done a blog, so it's worth having a look at that. I think that's going to factor into thinking going forward. Then the very last one is recruitment. So thinking very carefully about how you go about recruiting as your workplace has changed and the dynamic of your team may well have changed. So all of that needs review as well. And I'm rushing because we've got 4 minutes left. Thank you.
Did you get a chance to ask questions?
Sally, just a quick one that popped up is, venturing into this is new territory for a lot of people. How would you suggest companies or business owners start that engagement with their staff on things like well-being, which really becomes a pretty sensitive subject? Is there some sort of methodology or process that you would recommend in terms of how you can drive that engagement?
Yeah, so well, I'd say 3 things. The first is be prepared to talk to staff and listen, but more importantly, know how to have those conversations. So we're not like the proverbial bull in the china shop. And then a tool such as a wellness action plan, we can download one from our website for free, is a really good mechanic for having those conversations and supporting line managers with it.
Great, excellent. Thanks so much, Sally Ann. So looking at where we've come from in the last hour and what we're talking, starting with purpose and the deliberateness of what the actions that we need to take, the underlying thing of what, from my perspective, my business perspective, and my staff's perspective, is happiness and well-being. The question that you got, where is my focus? And this kind of really refers to the direction of the energy, and the energy is where you're going to get your focus. And that raises the question of, why do we do what we do? So we need to be deliberate. We need to take intentional actions, so that one way of looking at it is to say the actions that we take are the guardrails that we put in place to ensure that we're not going to compromise on our promise. And what do we do in terms of not compromising our promises? We need to review the actions that we take, and we need to review what it is that we provide for our employees and for our customers. I suppose the key element through all of that, in pulling all of it together, is about communication. And communication starts with, why are we at work? Make it meaningful. If you're going to ask the staff for feedback, which is what we're encouraging everybody to do, then how do you drive engagement to ensure that you can deliver on what you promise? And I think through some of the services that the people on the panel and other services out there can certainly provide, in terms of being able to help deliver in terms of what that promise is. Because at the end of the day, the key question is, how do I position myself, my business, and my employees for success? And how do I do that deliberately so that I can deliver on the happiness and well-being, which will be there to support the purpose of my organization? So just in summing up, we are offering free, no obligation initial consultations in terms of doing a business review, financial review, a personal finance review, and from an HR perspective, a staff assessment required. So please feel free to open contact with Sally Ann, with Geoff, or with myself. We do have a survey at the end of the session that we'll post out. Please, if you would mind, just complete that. It won't take you any time. And if anybody would like, we have recorded the session, and if anybody would like a link to this, we'll share that as well. So please leave it open to you. Thanks so much for attending. We really appreciate your time and appreciate you being here. I don't think there's any more questions. So on that score, Geoff, if we're happy to close out, thanks very much for everybody for their time.
Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it. We've got a couple of things coming through in chat. I did see something else in the question that just came up. Don't know if there's one other thing there, but I can't see anything, which has been annoying.
No, it's all right, Geoff. It's just some responses to some of the questions have been raised. So
perfect.
We're all right.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you very much for dialing in.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.